And the Anime Award goes to Attack on Titan, final season, final chapter, special one, Shingeki no Kyojin.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Ah, the Crunchyroll Awards. This probably isn't the first time that you've heard someone complain about them, and I'm certainly not going to be the last one to do so. The Crunchyroll Anime Awards have been going on since around 2016, allowing fans to vote on their favorite categories for their favorite anime that happened to air over that previous year. This is set up more or less the same way things like the Oscars are set up, with different categories like Best Director, Best Voice Acting Performance in the case of anime, and things like Best Art, Best Character Designs, all sorts of different categories that fans can vote on just based on their own personal thoughts and feelings. And to be honest, in the very beginning of the awards' inception, I thought it was kind of a fun way to engage the fans, because Crunchyroll was basically just an anime streaming site. It had nothing to do with the industry as a larger whole, and it just gave fans a chance to show what kinds of shows they liked and things that they were appreciating with no bigger consequences. Fast forward to 2024, where the previous year of 2023 was being judged, and we have a full red carpet production hosted in Tokyo with industry veterans and professionals coming in, and various anime related and not even anime related celebrities coming to present awards in all sorts of different categories to celebrate anime. As you can see, these awards have gotten a lot bigger than they were probably ever intended to become. And as much as I really don't care that much about awards shows in general, this year just really bothered me a lot, specifically because, as you can see from the title, Crunchyroll doesn't know anything about music. Now, it's a little bit weird for me to put it in those words, particularly because Crunchyroll themselves as a company doesn't have anything to do with how these categories, or I guess the nominations for each category, are selected. From some light research online, you can find that their judging pool is actually selected from industry veterans and professionals, as well as a lot of anime-related content creators. My gripes are very much more specifically geared towards things like music. And this doesn't just go for the music category itself, but because music and sound-related things always seem to be very off-putting for people who don't really understand the finer nuances of how music works, it seems to be weirdly judged by people who clearly don't have any knowledge on the matter. It doesn't seem like they know a lot of people that know how to talk about music. And given that they have so many industry connections, as they've put it, it seems weird that the music picks are always so lackluster and kind of basic. My biggest argument against the way that they judge things right now is that they probably should shift more towards an Oscar-like approach, where only people within the industry are actually doing the judging, and then I suppose if they wanted to, they could have some people who do anime reviews, but again, all these people who are online, whether they're huge content creators or maybe smaller people like me, we're really nothing more than just fans with a platform. And so I feel like it's not fair for people like us to be judging unless it's on more broad categories. I think fans hold about 30% sway, which is pretty significant when you consider that that's like almost a third of the power of the whole voting base. But if they want to keep it that way, then I feel like they should do fan favorite awards, so they could have just one category that's a fan favorite of best anime or whatever sort of broad thing they can do, or having something a little more specialized, so doing something like having the awards show presenting what the judges and the industry professionals and all of those related people have voted for in the actual awards show, and then maybe in the bottom third or something, you could have a little box that just shows what the fans voted for, or even just posting all of the things online so that we can see what the fan vote was versus the professional vote for each section. It's kind of bad to keep letting the fans vote in such a way that they have all this power over it. Fans are just going to vote for what their favorite is. They don't care about what the category is. And of course, this is not exactly a failure, but it's a carryover from the old system when it was just an online fan poll. Whether we like to admit it or not, the Crunchyroll Awards have become something of a prestigious awards ceremony for anime on a global perspective. More disillusioned fans like myself and obviously everyone else who has complained about it online just don't really see these meaning anything even with all the prestige attached to them. Getting back to the main point, my biggest gripe with the Crunchyroll Awards is of course the music section. Best opening and best ending are usually pretty decent because that's not necessarily just about the song, there's a whole animated section, and so when people are voting on the favorite song, they're not just voting on the song, they're voting for the actual intro or outro sequence that goes with it. But like I've said in the past before, and in honestly a lot of real life conversations, people in general just don't really know how to talk about music. I mean, even people who know a lot about music don't always know what to say. I often find myself at a loss for words when I'm trying to describe something because music is a lot about feeling, but I'm always very conscious of it, so I'm kind of a weird outlier when it comes to listening to background music and soundtracks and scores and things like that. So just to kind of go over again how Crunchyroll, or rather their judging panel, don't really know what they're doing when they're nominating music sections, let's just look at every past year's nominations and winners and just go over them really quickly to see where things went wrong. So starting off with the year of 2016, and would you look at that, there is no music category, or at the very least there is no soundtrack category. Maybe there was an opening and ending thing. I just have the list that I've written out here, and there wasn't one for the best soundtrack. I'm not gonna be too upset about it. Again, this started out as just a fan poll online and they would just show off whatever came up. It just seems like they hadn't really refined their categories yet because again, it was just a poll for fun. Honestly, I didn't mind it that way. I don't remember necessarily liking a lot of the results that won or anything like that, but I mean, it was just a fun way to see what people were interested in. Next, we have 2017, the year that arguably I think is probably the only year that I don't actually have any real arguments against or any problems with, because when we take a look at these nominations and the one that actually won, they're all great. The winner was obviously Made in Abyss, Kevin Penkin. I talked about it in a previous video. I wasn't super into it, and I definitely didn't vote for it in the winning category, but you know, I'm not upset that it won. And it was up against a lot of other great shows, like I didn't watch Akka, but Akka was there, and the soundtrack by Takahashi Ryo, who is just incredible. He wrote the soundtrack for Healer Girl and Sing a Little Bit of Harmony. Incredible soundtracks. So I'm assuming Akka also must have had a great soundtrack. And we also had Land of the Lustrous, Hoseki no Kuni by Fujisawa Yoshiaki. I have talked about many times on this channel, and I absolutely love that soundtrack. It's still probably one of, if not my favorite anime soundtrack to this day. Just amazing stuff there. We also had Little Witch Academia, Oshima Michiru, arguably my favorite anime composer of all time, with one of my favorite soundtracks. I think I might like it a little bit less than Land of the Lustrous, but I mean, it was amazing. And then there was Recreators, Sawano Hiroyuki. It's not really surprising that Sawano is here because of course he's been popular basically since he stepped onto the scene. And then last for that year we had The Ancient Magus Bride by Matsumoto Junichi. I don't really remember this soundtrack. I know it was very pretty. I think the music for it was really good. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but very fitting, very pretty. And all of these were just great things that all could have probably won. And the fact that Kevin Penkin won that year really put him in the spotlight for now what has become his very well-off career in anime music. Sad to say that in 2018 they took away the soundtrack category. Why? I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense to me, especially since 2018 was a fantastic year. I mean, just some shows that I have listed off here. You snubbed the year with Violet Evergarden and Soreyori, A Place Further Than the Universe, Gridman, Golden Kamui, Review Starlight, Unicamp, Planet With, Megalobox, Hiroaka Season 3, Liz and the Bluebird. I mean, the list goes on. There were some amazing, incredible soundtracks that year. Why did they take it away? I don't know, but anyway, that's a different argument. Clearly, we're still trying to figure things out. It was only the third time they were doing it, so you know what? We'll let it slide, though. Again, they gave up on probably one of the best years for music. 2019, we had the winner being Carol and Tuesday soundtrack by Mokki. This is where I have a big problem with Crunchyroll listing this category as Best Score. There is a very big difference between a score and a soundtrack. To the average person, a soundtrack and a score differ in the fact that a score is background music and a soundtrack is whatever music they put into the film or series or whatever. Generally, a score doesn't include things like insert songs because insert songs are not scored, whereas a soundtrack can have zero original music. Like, you could have an entire soundtrack made up of all just like, say, radio pop songs, and that would be a soundtrack. Soundtrack is more overarching, whereas score is a narrower section of that, where it's original music written for the background. Carol and Tuesday is a great example of saying amazing soundtrack, not such a great score. I don't remember any of the background music really. It was mostly just all of the pop songs because they were so well written. They should really just call it best soundtrack. Some of the other shows from that year were Kajiura Yuki and Shinino Go's Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, but I remember that year specifically, Kajiura had written, I think, 12 tracks in the entirety of Demon Slayer. Shina wrote over 300 tracks for the first season of Demon Slayer alone, but because he's not a household name in the anime community, and she very much is, they put her name first and always like listed her as the lead composer or main composer. Totally tangential, but like I got mad about something that was not really related. We had Sawano Hiroyuki for Attack on Titan Season 3. Again, not a surprise that it's here. It was really cool in the first season hearing a lot of his music, but as time went on, he wasn't really doing anything to evolve it with the changing elements of the show. Kevin Penkin again, The Rising of the Shield Hero. This is probably his least memorable soundtrack. I don't remember at all what it sounds like, and I sat through the first 2 seasons of it and I don't remember any of the music. And then we had Dr. Stone, which has 3 main composers, Kato Tatsuya, Tsutsumi Hiroaki, and Kanesaka Yuki. Amazing soundtrack. I will get more into it later. Kanno Yugo for JoJo Golden Wind. Hands down, this should have won. This should have been the top pick. Everything about that whole part was just like really well done. The music is so memorable from it. It's probably one of the most memed anime songs of all time at this point. The JoJo theme, that one specifically, because I guess there's a JoJo theme for every season. That definitely should have won. In fairness, I don't remember if they called it best score at that point. Maybe they just called it best music, in which case, fair enough. If we're gonna go off best score from here on out, I don't think that Carol and Tuesday should have won that category. In 2020, we had the winner being Kevin Penkin for Tower of God. I remember the vibe of it being really cool, but I didn't really watch the show, and a lot of his music hasn't really stuck with me until recently, but that's a different topic. God of High School by Alisa Okehazama. I watched the show, but I don't really remember the music for it at all. Ushio Kensuke for Japan Sings 2020. Again, I didn't watch that show, but I mean, it's Ushio. He's incredible, so I'm sure it was really good. Keep Your Hands Off the Eizouken by Oru Taichi. Cool show. I don't remember any of its music, so I don't really think that one was worth the nomination, though it was probably kind of indie slash art housey music. I'm not a huge fan of indie music. I understand why other people like it, but it's not for me. Beastars, Kosaki Satoru, not one of his stronger soundtracks, but definitely I remember it setting a very specific vibe, and Kosaki is an amazing composer, so no surprise to me at all that it got nominated, and I probably voted for, oh no, I definitely didn't vote for it because the last nomination was Great Pretender, Yamada Yutaka. I definitely voted for that one to win. A trend that I've kind of noticed is that regular audiences don't really vibe with jazz. People like listening to jazz, but they don't care about it beyond just like, oh, that's fun in the moment. I'm kind of surprised that Great Pretender didn't win this one, especially since it was one of the bigger shows that year. Who knows? I mean, again, Western audiences are drawn to Kevin Penkin, but I really think that Great Pretender should have swept that year. And then we jump to 2021, where the winner was Kajiura Yuki Shina Go for Demon Slayer, the Mugen Train art. I don't think I really liked the picks this year. We've got Wonder Egg Priority, Day Mouse, and Mito. I don't know who those 2 are, but I don't really remember Wonder Egg Priority's music. I think it was kind of whimsical and weird, which was cool in its own way, but I don't really remember anything about it. Vivi by Kosaki Satoru, which looking at this list right now, I think that probably should have won. That was an amazing soundtrack, like just, oh, so good. Megalobox Box 2 Nomad by Mabanua. That had some really cool music, and that is a great way of showing off how to evolve a soundtrack with the vibe of the show, because Nomad and Megalobox, they are so different from each other, and so the music changing to fit the vibes of both of them was so important, and Mabanua captured that just so well. Odd Taxi, soundtrack by Punpi, Vava, and OMSB. Odd Taxi is a weird one because the soundtrack itself, there were a lot of weird tracks in it. There were a lot of like really good tracks, but I only remember a handful. I just remember there was one that had like fart noises in it. That's the main takeaway I had from the soundtrack itself. 86, Sawano Hiroyuki and Yamamoto Kouta. That seems to be when they started working together. I don't know if Yamamoto is Sawano's protege or something, but they seem to work on a lot of things together now. It was fine. It's your standard kind of Sawano thing. I'm never going to be surprised to see his name, but I'm never really going to be happy to see him get propped up over shows that are probably more deserving, which leads me into 2022, where he and Yamamoto won for Attack on Titan, the final season, part 2. I don't really have anything to say about that. The music was meh. It's always good, but it just doesn't do anything different. And I know people get mad at me when I say that, like, you don't have to change things for the sake of changing it. It's not for the sake of changing it, especially since Attack on Titan's final seasons all changed the vibe so much from the first one that even though there was a lot of differences with Yamamoto's more orchestral tracks and things like that, this is specifically about part 2, so we had already gotten kind of accustomed to the changes in the music from part 1, so this part didn't really deserve to win. Cyberpunk Edge Runners, soundtrack by Yamaoka Akira. I'll admit right now I still haven't watched Cyberpunk, and I really should because I've heard nothing but amazing things about it. The music, I'm sure, is amazing. Demon Slayer, Kajiura and Shina, again, doesn't deserve to win for music at least. Kevin Bacon, Made in Abyss, Season 2, which 1000%, this is what should have won this year. I don't want to say I don't vibe with his music. I don't really connect with it in the same way that a lot of other people do. This was kind of the soundtrack that started to turn me around towards his music more. There was also Spy Family, which got nominated, but again, general audiences don't like jazz for whatever reason, but this was also just such a good soundtrack, such a great score. It pains me when people pass up on the jazz ones because they're jazz. I feel like it's only because they're jazz. And then of course the last one for that year was your boy Kong Ming, Paripikome by Hikota Genki. I don't remember the score at all. The soundtrack, it had some great pop music. Amazing music came out of that show, but it wasn't the score. I know for a fact that they started calling it best score for this year because this was, I want to say that this was the first Tokyo hosted red carpet event that they did. That one just didn't really deserve it. Again, people don't know the difference between the score and soundtrack. That includes industry people and random content creators who are nominating it. No Yofukashi no Uta, no Call of the Night being like one of the most incredible lo-fi soundtracks that I've ever heard. It was the guy who wrote a lot of the music for Nagi no Asukara. How did he go from like writing vibey, emotional music into just doing like cool lo-fi beats? It was wild and I loved it. And then we have last year. This is probably the worst year that they've had for nominations. So let's go through it quickly. The winner being Sawano and Yamamoto again for Attack on Titan again. The final season, the final chapter, special 1. It's gonna win again next year for part 2, and I don't even want to see what it beats out. This did not deserve the win. Chainsaw Man, Ushio Kensuke. I don't really remember the music from Chainsaw Man. I know it was vibey and it was cool, but I just don't remember it. And then we had Suzume by Radwimps and Jinouchi Kazuma. Movies in general shouldn't be considered in the same categories as TV shows, full-length 12, 24 episode, whatever shows, because they're made so differently. Such a different way, there's such a different budget, and the way that the budget can be handled as well. And because it's a movie, it's actually one of the only things on here that has like a score, not just a soundtrack. I don't really remember the music from Suzume, but arguably this is the only one on this list that should win. Oshinoko by Iga Takuro. There were some really great tracks on it. The soundtrack as a whole was fine. It's okay. I've listened to it a few times and like I really like the tracks that I like. The rest of it is just kind of fluff. Like it was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just background fluff. Even the pop songs were not amazing. There were maybe like 3, which is why I'm so confused why Oshinoko got nominated for this segment when it doesn't even really fall under the pitfalls that the other music-related shows have in the past nominations. This one didn't really deserve to be here. Bocchi the Rock, Kikuya Tomoki, exact same thing as Oshinoko, except that it had even more songs that were integrated into the show, which is why it gets confusing when you're trying to differentiate a score and a soundtrack. The insert songs, amazing, just great songs. So much good stuff came out of that. The background music, I could not even pretend to remember like a single melody or jingle or anything that came out of Bocchi the Rock. Not one that should have been on this list. And then last, Demon Slayer, again, nothing new about it. It sounded the same as every other season. It's fine, like, it sounds good. They're gonna prop up Kajiura's name again. She's probably written like 30 tracks while Sheena has written 8,000, so it's whatever. That's it. The worst year for best score nominations was 2023, bar none. As you can see, from the very beginning, not counting the very first year when they didn't have a music category, that 2017 year was amazing. Every single soundtrack deserved to be there. And I don't know who the judges were. There were obviously way less. At least these people actually seemed to go over which things they thought should be nominated for these categories, and it felt like it was well curated. Whereas this past year, I don't understand why it ended up being this way, where it's just like it's a popularity contest, but now it's a popularity contest between the judges because the judges are also just fans that don't know anything about music. We've gotten to the point where Attack on Titan is just gonna win every time, ends next year, but like I don't want to see it win again just because it's Sawano. And I think the main problem is actually that people just don't know the difference between a good score, a good soundtrack, and good sound direction. If we're talking about the differences in sound production and direction, then yes, Attack on Titan and Demon Slayer probably do deserve to be there. The use of music in certain scenes, the use of sound effects and things that they need to make you feel certain ways in certain scenes, it works so well. But that has nothing to do with the music itself. That's all about the sound direction. You need to have soundtracks that evolve with the show, evolve with the story, and change to fit the atmosphere. Otherwise, you just end up with a lot of things that sound samey. Yes, you want the overall world to sound the same because you're still in the same universe, generally, but you want it to feel different. You want something to change so that there's a different atmosphere to fit the new settings or new characters or new motivations or things that change. It's not about changing for the sake of changing. It's about continuations and improving and getting better, improving on yourself as well. Made in Abyss is such a perfect example of that. Kevin Penkin himself said that Made in Abyss Season 2 is probably the best soundtrack he's ever written. It showed, and it changed a lot. Obviously, you can still tell it's still in the universe of Made in Abyss, and in the Abyss, fundamentally, it's the same, but it's such an improvement overall. The last sort of section that I want to talk about is that because it's still kind of fresh on my mind, I know I'm very late to talking about this since the awards were back in March. 2023, they snubbed so many shows that definitely deserve to be at least nominated, because so many of the nominated things didn't really deserve to be there. Suzume probably deserves to be there the most, but also because it's the only movie, it also feels like it doesn't deserve to have been in that section. I just want to go over a bunch of the shows that I thought really deserved at least a spot, if not the actual win. Tensei Ojo to Tensei Reijo no Maho Kakume. It had one of the most gripping soundtracks that I've heard that stuck with me from the very start of the year. It was so good. Like, I remember hearing the overture theme and just thinking, like, wow, like you don't hear music a lot like this. Hyuga Moe, she hasn't done a ton of soundtracks, but she wrote the soundtrack for If My Favorite Idol Went to Budokan, I Would Die, or something. I can't remember the Japanese title. I feel like it wasn't the first time I heard her name, but it was the first time I definitely fully invested into a soundtrack that was done only by her. And just, wow, that one was amazing. This one was also amazing. This was kind of a sleeper hit, and I don't think a lot of people paid attention to this show. It definitely should have gotten more attention than it did, especially the soundtrack should have gotten more attention than it did. Number 2, My Happy Marriage, Watashi no Shiawase na Kekkon. Evan Call, has he been nominated ever for any of these categories? They skipped him on the Violet Evergarden year, and I mean, I guess this is probably like his second major soundtrack. It was not as strong as Violet Evergarden's, but considering you didn't even include a music category in the year of Violet Evergarden, and then when the movie came out, they didn't put that movie into the music category. How did people pass up this one soundtrack? Like, this is a Netflix show. From what I understand, a lot of people watched it, so I don't really see why it didn't get in there. I mean, yes, Free Rent was on the mind at the time of the nominating process. It's the same guy, and the fact that he's writing one of your favorite soundtracks in the current moment should make you want to think, oh, what else did he do? And then you would see that he scored a show from the previous year that just, they passed up on it, and I don't understand why. It's such a waste to skip over that. The next one that I have listed here is probably the show that I think should have just absolutely swept, like bar none. Trigun Stampede. Kato Tatsuya has written some amazing soundtracks. From the very first soundtrack I heard by him, over the years he's grown and improved and changed so much, but he's still fundamentally him. You can hear those little Kato-isms that make his music his. It's so good, the way that it's all culminated into undeniably his best soundtrack of all time. I would argue that any day against anyone that his soundtrack for Trigun Stampede blew everything out of the water, like no competition for 2023, and it didn't even get a nomination. And yet Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan were there again and again, but this one, I don't know, I was very, very salty that this didn't get in there. Not only that, but that he didn't get nominated for anything else like Dr. Stone, which is the next thing that I have there. The first season got nominated in the music section, so I'm happy about that, and I'm wondering if maybe that's why it didn't get nominated again, but that wouldn't make sense because Attack on Titan's been nominated like 8 million times. Dr. Stone's been upping its music game every season, and it's also been changing every season. This is what I'm saying. This is what you need to appreciate with music in soundtracks and shows that continue on and have developing stories and more characters and things that change within them. You feel it in the atmosphere, even if you don't necessarily hear the music or understand what's changing. It's such a shame that something as good as Dr. Stone's music hasn't been nominated ever since the first season. And then another show I had was Revenger, which I did a whole video on because Tamata June has never written an anime soundtrack before until this. She brought in so many fresh things, just amazing amount of things that you would never hear in any other anime soundtrack. This is exactly what an awards show should be celebrating. Fresh developments of new ideas that make waves in an already established system, because when you can change something that everyone has already kind of gotten used to and mellowed out to, it's amazing. And Revenger's soundtrack did so many things with that. Again, I'll link the video to that somewhere up here or wherever in the description down below. You can watch it anywhere, but why did it not even get recognized? I know the show wasn't great, but you don't need to be a great show to have a great soundtrack. The next one that I have listed is Spy Family, because we're covering fall of 2022 all the way through summer of 2023, and then they don't count fall 2023 until next year. Spy Family deserves more recognition for its music. It has also been changing and adapting to fit the narrative changes of Spy Family. I know there are not a ton of those because it's mostly a comedy show, but it feels like it's changing a lot more than Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan are. Spy Family is improving, so at the very least it should be keeping a consistent intrigue level, but again, people hate jazz, and I don't know why. Stop hating jazz, people. Another show, Inspector Season 2, Kyoko Sweetie. I don't think Season 1 was ever nominated. I don't remember reading it earlier, and it's a crime it has such good music, so much amazing atmosphere, recurring themes, recurring motifs, things that come back and are used as thematic elements throughout the soundtrack to great effect. The music for that is so good. And then also its main theme is in 5/4. Mission Impossible is probably the only thing most people know that's in 5. Jazz people will know Take 5, obviously, but again, people hate jazz, so who's gonna know what that is? Either way, it was just very, very cool music that is not being recognized. Next thing is a little more controversial for me. It's the BokuAi KimiAi movies. To every you I've loved before, and to you, the one who loved only me. Again, I don't really think it's fair to include movies in this category because the music is composed so differently. These soundtracks definitely should have been in here. I know in my sort of weird review video I did of the movies, I didn't really talk about the music, and I even mentioned that I wasn't paying attention to it, but since seeing them, I have listened to their soundtracks over and over again, and it has some of the most beautiful themes I've ever heard. In general, I think the way that they utilized a lot of the music, the way that they made a lot of themes memorable and made you feel certain ways just by hearing the same theme set to different instruments or different tempos, and not even changing like a lot of the harmonies or anything, but making you feel a different way because you're in a different context. It was just amazing. It came out in fall of 22. I think it was October. They came out in Japan, so they still technically fit into this category, and even if they didn't for 2022, they didn't get released until spring of 23 for the rest of the world, so they really should have been included. And as far as my own video's performance went, they seemed to be pretty popular. At least they seemed more popular than Suzume was, and I didn't make a video about that, but I'm assuming it wouldn't have done as well. Who knows? But yeah, they deserve to be there more than Suzume did. At least one of them. Maybe that's why they didn't pick it, because it was 2 movies and they both had one soundtrack for both movies. Next one that should have been on there. Insomniacs After School. Kimi wa Hokago no Insomnia. Why did this not get included? Yofukashi no Uta wasn't included. So I'm kind of seeing a pattern here that similar lo-fi, chill vibe soundtracks don't get put into these things. This was not a soundtrack I was expecting to hear from Hayashi Yuki, who everyone knows from My Hero Academia because everyone thinks you say run. I didn't even realize this was him until like I researched it, because I was like, oh wow, this music is really beautiful, it's amazing, and it's fitting so well with the show. Self-improvement, self-growth, changing, growing as an artist. Stagnation is the death of an artist. Hayashi showing off that he can change a lot over short spans of time. This is what artists are meant to do. They're meant to change, to grow as they grow. It's a shame that this was not nominated. And then last, one of the most upsetting ones, Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga Season 1 didn't get nominated, and honestly that one deserved it more than Vinland Saga Season 2, but Season 2 also didn't get nominated for music. Yamada Yutaka, he is one of these composers that I will actually go out of my way to watch a show for just because of the music. He doesn't write a lot of anime soundtracks. The only nomination he's had on this list, Great Pretender, and that got snubbed because jazz, of course. I haven't watched any of the newer Tokyo Ghoul things, so I don't know how their soundtracks sound, but I'm sure they're still just amazing because, again, they're still him. Vinland Saga, I know people don't think of the music as much as they think of the story and the character growth, but the music is really, again, what's setting the atmosphere, and it's so annoying when something as good as this gets snubbed, because Yamada deserves to be in this category every year that he writes a soundtrack. Instead of getting actually innovative composers, we're getting Kajira and Sawano every year. I don't know, it bothers me a lot more than it should, especially since I don't even care about these awards. Those are the 10 that I thought of on the spot when I first wrote up that long post on my YouTube channel, and I'm sure there were more that deserve to be placed here that I forgot about or just didn't watch. Trigun definitely should have won 100%. It should have taken that, and it didn't even get a nomination, which is weird that it got nominated for other things like, I guess, Best Animation, but its music didn't. With the growing popularity of anime and Crunchyroll being the main distributor and streaming service of anime for the rest of the world outside of Japan, it's kind of impossible to ignore the prestige of these awards at this point. As much as I don't really like the Crunchyroll Awards or award shows in general, you don't really pass up or ignore the prestige behind them. Like, if someone tells me there's a movie that's been nominated for an Oscar, I don't really care about the Oscars, but that does make me more interested in going to see it. There's a certain quality that you recognize even if you don't really like the way that these awards are given out. In the end, what I think these awards need is more curated judging by people who actually kind of know what they're talking about. We're just getting more and more boring milquetoast, just less interesting picks for each year, specifically in music. Compare 2017's to 2023's and you can see the stark difference, how we went from some like fantastic nominations to whatever this is. It's not to say that there wasn't good music in 2023. I just listed off 10 that all were just as good as 2017's actual nominations. What we need are judges that pick things based on what they know about, or a system where judges can choose what things they're nominating, what sections or categories, so that they can choose things that they actually know about or they feel strongly about and they have reasons to back up what they do. They don't necessarily have to list their reasons, but I don't think it's fair to say Demon Slayer fan football player is gonna pick Demon Slayer for the best soundtrack because he doesn't know anything about music and that's the one that he remembers the most. That's not a good reason. It's the same way that if I were ever a judge, I would never pick things like best animation or best character design. Like, I would vote on them after other people have nominated them based on my own preferences, but I don't know anything about art. I'm not a visual art person. I like looking at visual art. I don't really understand anything about it. I'm a sound-based person, so I could talk about sound. I could talk about like voice actor performances, though I would only nominate Japanese ones because that's the only way that I really watch anime anymore. And even then, I probably wouldn't. I would just specifically stick to things like Anime of the Year, maybe Best Movie, and Best Soundtrack. I feel like if they did it this way, you would have nominations that are actually curated by people who know what they're talking about, rather than just having semi-curated popularity contest that then goes to a bigger popularity contest and just doesn't really mean anything in the end. I know people don't really care about music, especially not as much as me, and especially not in the soundtrack category or score category as Crunchyroll is putting it. I would volunteer to be a judge and specifically only do the best score category if I knew that other people who were picking for that also knew what they were talking about for music. And that way, even if my picks didn't necessarily get in, or not all of them got in, I would feel justified in knowing that at least other people picked things because there was a reason for them to, and not just because, well, they liked the show and therefore the music for the show must have been good. I don't think that my voice or argument on this matter is going to be heard, especially not by anyone at Crunchyroll who cares. I don't think they care about that because I am not the average viewer, which makes me sound kind of arrogant and annoying, but I mean, in a way that kind of fits with how this is all going. But anyway, I think that's the end of my rant. I put my suggestions there. If you could get more curated judging, get judges to only pick categories that they actually feel that they have knowledge on, or feel like they actually are passionate about the picks that they're picking. Those are only my suggestions. How would you guys change the Crunchyroll Awards and their judging systems? And let me know if you think I missed any shows that should have been nominated for Best Score, because I listed off 10 over the course of 2023. Let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Maybe if this gets boosted enough, I'd be super surprised if it did, because this is just a big long rant about nothing. Maybe Crunchyroll will see it and might consider me for a judge, or at the very least might take my ideas into consideration. At the very least, I want something to change. Something needs to change to make these more curated, more specific, and just go back to the way it was in the beginning, at least in terms of how the picks were done, because at least they were more interesting back then, even if single shows swept the whole thing. Getting people to try and change things, that's all I ask for. I just want them to change something for the better, because otherwise this is just going to keep going downhill. I will do my own anime awards show specifically for the music. If they screw up next year, which I'm sure they will, because Attack on Titan is definitely going to win over Apothecary Diaries, which is a travesty, but it's gonna happen, so I'll do my own thing, and we'll see how that goes. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to support me on Patreon if you want to see the longer cut of this video, because I'm sure I'm gonna cut out a lot of the fluff. If you want to see more of me talking about nothing, or if you want to get access to any behind-the-scenes content or extra goodies that my patrons get, such as the transcriptions I do for my analytical videos, make sure to go over to Patreon and support me there. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you in the next one.